A very warm welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine and see if I can guess what their favourite things about each episode might be.
Hi Toby, I'm Steve Lyons. I'm a writer of Doctor Who and some other stuff, and I would like to challenge you to watch the Sensorites.
Well, hello everybody. Goodness me, it seems like a lot of water. Hopefully not water that's been poisoned. Who else drinks my water? Well, just me. So if anything happens to me, you'll know it's the water. But a lot of water has passed under the bridge and through the clump of deadly nightshade since I watched episode 2 of the Sensorites. I don't know why real life has got in the way. Doctor Who's latest season has come to an end. There's hidden danger in this episode of Doctor Who, but presumably it's not hidden underneath a cowl and turns out not to be danger. But let's not go there right now. I sometimes wonder with these whether I should, not make any reference to what's going on in the outside world at the time of recording, because you could, of course, listen to this at any point. You might be, 2027 and you're in a Sensorites mood and you go, oh, let's listen to Toby chuntering away aimlessly through the Sensorites. And then suddenly I ground it in a fixed point in time. So apologies for that, but it's just in case, I don't know, I hope I don't repeat anything that I said in episodes 1 and 2, but it was probably only about a week ago, a week and a half. And here I was some years ago trying to get all the people that were in the Sensorites to try and remember what it was like making the Sensorites, and here am I going, I can't even remember what I said about the Sensorites a week and a half ago. So yes, me who demands of 80-year-old actors to tell me what they'd been doing 45 years previously. But there we go. That's the life of a wandering geek who's going. I felt I went a bit Partridgean then. Well, I went to sort of Wogan. Oh, I'm a wandering geek. Oh, I turned a bit Wogan in a Partridge doing Wogan sort of way. If you're from America, you may not know who either Terry Wogan or Alan Partridge. Terry Wogan was a much-loved BBC broadcaster. Oh, yes, you probably have done Eurovision, won't you? Who is spoofed in Bang Bang a Boom, the Big Finish Doctor Who Eurovision spoof, amongst others, who occasionally, when Alan Partridge, who's a fictional DJ played by Steve Coogan, who's an utter tool, occasionally, does a bit of Wogan voice. He's somebody that will sort of put on voices to avoid awkwardness or to try and be something that he isn't. He's an awkward man, and I feel all of us, particularly men of a certain age, have a certain Partridge about them, and the one's the higher one's Partridge percentage is, the more egregious one is, I think. So we all have to try and strangle our inner Partridge, or at least ensure that it doesn't come out of the pear tree. Bad metaphors is another thing. Alan Partridge. Oh my God, am I Alan Partridge? Oh well, that's a worry. Well, here we go. So you're listening to North Norfolk FM's Doctor Who commentary on the Sensorites, and I will begin by firing up episode 3, The Hidden Danger. What could possibly be the hidden danger on the Sense Sphere in episode 3 of the Doctor Who adventure, The Sensorites, which I'm watching alongside, well, not alongside, he watched it ages ago, Doctor Who, New Adventures and Big Finish and all sorts of other things, completely useless encyclopedia writer, Steve Lyons, who is a jolly, nice chap, quiet, softly spoken, very funny, and he's chosen what he admits is not his favourite story of season 1, but he's lumbered us with it. He's lumbered old Wogan with episode with this six episode unloved Hartnell story. But of course, I watched this in preparation and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Although I admit I did find the commentary for episode 2 a bit of a struggle, and I certainly enjoyed episode 2 more than these middle instalments. But maybe we'll get into that's why I will always try to accentuate the positive. But a few listeners have said, yeah, you don't try too hard. If there are bits that aren't great, it's all right to say, so long as you do it with no, they haven't said so long as you do it with a song in your heart. They've just said, grow a pair. If something's a bit crap, say so. So let's see how that goes. I will always try to sympathise with the creators and movers and shakers of the Hooniverse, but it has to be acknowledged. This is not the most loved 2.5 hours. Sometimes it seems longer of the Hartnell era, but there's much to talk about. There's much to treasure, as well as some hidden danger in episode 3 of the Sensorites. And I'm going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So yes, it is. It is a while since I did episode 2, but I this is where the story is supposed to get interesting, because this is where the story takes us to the Sense Sphere, takes us actually to the planet of the Sensorites. But I wonder if they're a brave attempt to show that not all aliens are bad, and I think that's a very important early mission statement in Doctor Who. And they're such a good design that they do look mysterious. They could be bad, as it turns out. They're nice and they're good. That's a nicely framed shot. I like the way that the title caption and the writer caption are in the middle of the circle that is the door. I think that's rather artfully done. It's important, I think, that the first season of Doctor Who had some aliens that weren't bad, and its circumstance, it's being cut off from the TARDIS. There's hidden danger indeed everywhere in Doctor Who. I mean, Marco Polo, that there is a villain, but one of the good guys is as responsible for potentially preventing Ian and Barbara from getting back to 20th century Earth, which is the story driver, of this first season. The fact that having moved away from planet Earth in the 20th century, that it may never be possible to get back, and the adventures are what sort of happens in between. I love the fact that it's Ian and Barbara go together. I think a lesser series would have had Ian do the rough and tumble, and I think a more modern series might want the series lead to sort of lead the way. But everybody, this is the whole quartet getting used very well. Actually, credit to Peter R. Newman is that he's taken the brief that Susan is the Doctor's granddaughter, and used that as the dynamic here. To resolve the cliffhanger that kind of goes nowhere, because she'd said, I'm going to go with them, and they will kill me. I love the way that the Sensorites sort of give away what they're about to do. This is where I think this story in particular does a few sort of kiddies drama stuff that Doctor Who tends to avoid. That bit where they say, well, let us stun them with our stun rays within earshot of the heroes, and then the heroes turn the light off. That's a bit pony. I do actually, however, like this. I love this. The Doctor saying, look, we can defeat you, but we're not going to. We're benign. It's a bit like the moment where Peter Davison gives the gun over in Warriors of the Deep. One of those, this is what I am. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be completely clean with you. That I'm going to trust you to be honest with you, which I rather like. And in fact, dishonesty is what gets the TARDIS crew into a lot of trouble in Marco Polo. And I love that dynamic in Marco Polo where they sort of, Ian gets caught in his own lies and manipulation. But they're lies that he told for good reason. Whereas here, the Doctor's going, well, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and also, we have power over you, but we're not going to use it. That's even more powerful in a way. And of course, the fact that it's established now that the Sensorites get terrified by loud noises. I think the actors do nice things when Hartnell raises his voice. I noticed, I think it was Joe Gregg sort of raising his hands a little bit as if to say, oh, I don't like that noise. And then there's something rather sweet, I think, about the lights being off and them being all scared. And here I was talking about the dynamic here and Susan, being the school child again. But they've really blatantly let this play out here that that she is the doctor's granddaughter, which is, I mean, I've done another podcast about this where which is one of those things I kind of ignore. And in fact, since I watched episode 2 of this, Empire of Death has been on, which says that she is his granddaughter, but he hasn't had her parents yet. I don't know how that works yet. So, but my headcanon has always been, it's granddaughter is a euphemism, which I mean I have no justification for at all. I just don't want the Doctor getting it on, and yet it's. They've never had an argument, and now you've caused one. They had an argument in episode 1, Doctor Who, but I actually like this. It gives them a nice. The dynamic there is one that is not one that the Doctor ever has with anyone else, and I think that's really interesting. Even though I just don't know why am I resisting it? And it's funny because as I'm talking, I'm warming more to the idea that Susan is the Doctor's granddaughter. Maybe because Empire of Death has been blatant about it, but this is blatant about it. Maybe it's because that scene and this, the whole of the first sort of 5 minutes of this episode have been about the Doctor using the fact that he's Susan's granddaughter in order to stop her from doing the thing that she wanted to do, and for them to have that argument to give a bit of jeopardy and drama to the episode, because she wants to do this, he wants her to do that, and they get to sort of enunciate the issues surrounding the mysterious nature of the Sensorites, and that's I think all very well done, even though. Again, I think a little, some of the dialogue and some of the interaction is a little bit more children's drama sci-fi than Doctor Who often does. It's funny looking at this now because it wouldn't have occurred to me back in the day, but I look at this and you can tell it's sort of 3 actors in the corner of a set trying very hard with one camera. I'm mesmerised by the fact that the jackets seem to do up at the back, because it's the future, and that's what we'll do. We'll have jackets that do up at the back, because they're space jackets. Even though you must have to get somebody to do it for you, a bit like unbuckling your bra. You have to say, "Oh yeah, could you just?" Well, I suppose you end up being able to do it very well, don't you? I'm not a lady, so unhooking a bra is not. I mean, I've done it. Let's not get into how good or not I am at unhooking bras. Let's not get into me and bras at all. Let's just not go there. But not because let's just not go there. I'm sure I've already conjured images that you don't want to, that you don't want. Anyway, here are let's draw a line under. Let's draw a line under the brassieres. And I love the way that, look, he's got his hands in his pockets. He's not doing, because a lot of sort of leading men of this era are either a little bit too cool and casual, and a little bit sort of actors who are a bit sort of masculine and fancy themselves, or are a little bit kind of stiff and sincere. And I think William Russell is bang on at exactly the right point in the middle of that. He's not too cool for school. He's not the Cliff of the Anthony Coburn Drafts of Unearthly Child, who's so hateful and very masculine and uber male and a bit of a twit. But he's also not the sort of rigid leading man that often used to hamper shows of this kind. He is, for the time, but I mean even now I think he's very naturalistic, but not at the expense of the drama. He keeps it real. He grounds it, but without ever being too casual about the drama. I love him, and I don't think it's just because he's recently passed on. As I say, when I revisited season 2 when that Blu-ray box set came out, it was it just reminded me how much I adore all of these people. That first quartet. Last time I saw Carol Ann, she was she was an old lady all of a sudden, whereas I thought she'd actually always she always came across as 20 years younger than she actually was, but she seemed like an old lady because of course she is. She's my mum's age, and my mum's turned 80. Though my mum's pretty very sharp and tough as old boots. So old ladies are not what they were. The 80-year-olds of 30 years ago, I don't think can hold a candle to the 80-year-olds of today. Oh yeah, so Barbara's going to go on holiday. If you've not read Alvin Rakoff's book, by the way, he's Jacqueline Hill's husband, television director, nice man. I've been to his house. He lives in the same house she lived in Chiswick when she was in Doctor Who. Tell you what, it's a nice house, and they'd probably got it for a song in Chiswick in 1962 or whenever they bought it. But it's worth a few quid now, I'll tell you. But it's wonder. It's great. It's great. And why am I? And his book, Alvin Rakoff's book about being a director, and one particular production with Sean Connery, where Jacqueline Hill discovers Sean Connery or suggests him to Alvin. Alvin's recall is fantastic, but there's also stories of Alvin and Jacqueline going on holiday and some of the things they got up to at around the time that they were making this program. And it's his recall is superb and amazing. So here we have the Sensorites. There's a wonderful picture in Doctor Who the early years of around this scene of the actors without their masks on, and you can see Eric Elliott and I think it's actually pretty much this shot, and Peter Glaze standing there with his glasses on. Peter Glaze, very well known for Crackerjack. By the time anyone was looking back on this, I don't know the dates. Yes, I should have perhaps checked, but I don't know if he was known for Crackerjack when he did this. But he was a sort of bespectacled character actor. Tune into episode 4, because I'm ashamed I don't know that. It's the sort of thing I should know, or should at least have checked. I like the way that the First Elder brushes his beard upwards to cover his mouth. Presumably that's just how it grows. He doesn't fashion it like that. Well, maybe he does. I'm not gonna beard shame the Sensorite people. But anyway, there's this wonderful picture of the three of them, and I remember my brother looking at it and finding it quite comical, because it's sort of portly, middle-aged men in onesies. But again, it was a black and white, full-length picture in a hardback volume with Doctor Who design drawings in it and some quite long words. And it seemed to me to be the most amazing thing ever. I didn't see the comic incongruity of it. I thought it was, amazing, candid behind-the-scenes shots. But my brother, who was a bit older and perhaps not minded like me to see the body horror where other people will see sticky tape, saw, three portly character actors in onesies, where I saw this sort of magical portal to, a creative moment from the past. It's funny, isn't it? And I suppose Doctor Who will never lose that for me, even though, this is three actors giving quite sort of, they're all doing a decent job, but they're all, none of this is particularly sparkling dialogue, and none of it's particularly complex in terms of the way that the creatures interact with each other or what they're doing. The First Elder is sort of nice and trusting. The Second Elder is, the city administrator. Third Sensorite is bad, and Second Elder is sort of unsure in between, and they kind of have a row about that. But yes, Peter Glaze, I will find out whether he'd been doing Crackerjack. I think he must have been, but he is the cause of a piece of detective work from me, which meant that I never trust what you read in a Doctor Who book, even ones written by me. I've made mistakes, but this was malfeasance. I have mentioned this in another podcast in one of my Indefinable Magics. But Peter Glaze is written up in Doctor Who: A Celebration, which gives a slightly underwhelming write-up of the the Sensorites. Doctor Who: A Celebration was the sort of first indication of the basic landscape of Doctor Who's previous 20 years. It was a book that was brought out to celebrate 20 years of Doctor Who and was my gateway to the past of Doctor Who alongside the Radio Times 20th anniversary special. I like the way that they've sort of tried to populate the Sed sphere here, and there's a couple of non-speaking walk-ons there, Anthony Rogers and Jerry Martin. I've got a story to tell you about Anthony Rogers as well, or who Anthony Rogers isn't, but maybe we'll pad out parts 4 and 5 with those. Anyway, don't get distracted, Toby. I'm wandering around the Sed sphere and going up and down all sorts of corridors that it clearly doesn't have. I'm speaking much quicker than they're moving. But Doctor Who: A Celebration kind of hinted at the fact that the Sensorites was perhaps the sort of low moment of season 1, because I think it was felt to be a little bit slow moving and not too exciting. I would actually argue I think I probably prefer it to maybe the Keys of Marinus and the Reign of Terror, because whereas I think it's naive and flawed, I think it is a little bit more charming and doesn't have as many disastrous moments or aspects as some of those. Oh, poor old John. Yes, and you see, this is where it gets a little. It is more simplistic than both of those stories, though. John can tell the difference between good and evil. People are either good or evil. That Peter Glaze is evil. Eric Francis as the First Elder is good. It's in trying to make an alien race benign to stop Doctor Who from doing that traditional thing of saying all aliens are bad. So it tries to mix up the format a little bit. It does so in a way that is probably more simplistic than any other Doctor Who story. This, to me, seems closer to the kids' sci-fi that Doctor Who could have been had David Whittaker not, I think, had higher ambition. And I wonder why there's not so much work done on this to elevate it from the sort of kiddiness simplicity that it has, which maybe he didn't have time. Maybe I know they were up against it with season 1, but this isn't the same level of sophistication as Marco Polo. Do you know what I mean, in terms of or ambitiousness, intellectual ambitiousness? But I still find it quite charming, although I always counsel against it because I don't want to patronise it either. How dare I do such a thing? But there is a sort of naive charm about it. But yes, Peter Glaze, it mentions in Doctor Who's Celebration, one of the things it says about the story being underwhelming is that Peter Glaze's villain is scheming rather than truly villainous, and I read those story praises written by J. Jeremy Bentham, as it happens, over and over again. They were my way of getting a flavour of what the story was, and we couldn't watch the stories in those days, so it was my way of. So I used to be able to quote those. I think a much loved story at the time, but one that sadly no longer resides in the BBC archives, was Galaxy 4. There's the Space Pirates moves at something of a snail's pace. I used to I used to know them word for word, and they were very much my benchmark for all my understanding. And then Peter Haining brought out a book a few years later, and it had a chapter that was right up my street called Intergalactic Guest Stars, which, had little mentions of some of the actors over the years that appeared in Doctor Who, and it purported to have quotes from them. And it had Julian Glover saying, it wasn't my first brush with science fiction. It wasn't my only brush with science fiction. I'd been in Quatermass in the Pit, which Rudolph Cartier did for the BBC in 1958 or whatever. And you go, yeah, Rudolph Cartier did do Quatermass and the Pit for the BBC in 1958, but Julian Glover wasn't in that. He was in the film 9 years later. And Peter Glaze is one, and I knew Peter Glaze had died because it mentioned in Doctor Who the early years, the book with the pictures of them in, that obituaries at the time of Glaze's death 20 years after this even mentioned his Doctor Who role. So I knew that Glaze was dead. Such information wasn't so easy to come to in those days when there was no internet, and you sometimes had to go to the library to flick through big books of character actors, but they were few and far between and sometimes wrong. So anyway, you picked this stuff up, and then you had to you had to stick it in your brain, which is why I can still remember some of the sentences. But Peter Haining in the book, is it The Time Traveller's Guide? I think it is, yeah. Or 25 Glorious Years. No, I think it's one of those. And he quotes Peter Glaze. He says something like, blah, 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 laughs Peter. And I was like, hang on, Peter can't laugh. Peter's dead. And then, and what Peter laughed was, I wasn't really that much of a villain. I was more of a schemer. And you're going, hang on. He's just said pretty much, including using the scheme word, what Jeremy Bentham wrote, 4 years earlier in your other book, Peter Haining. And so it made me look at some of the other. They've got a quote from Robert Beatty saying, as General Cutler in 10th Planet, saying, "Oh, the studio was really hard. Some of those Cybermen guys really fried in those costumes." That's what you'd say an American/Canadian actor would say. He'd say fried, because it's the sort of thing that American/Canadians say. And I thought, he's just made all these bloody quotes up. So this chapter that I thought, well, they've gone to the trouble of, ringing some of these, or writing to, or getting he's just made it up. And that was a real moment for me to go, one, if it's too good to be true, check it. Two, if you've not seen that person be interviewed before and suddenly they are, check it. Three, just check it. Just check it. And I would say now that, that it's pretty obvious to me that those quotes were made up, which, I just think is unforgivable. I've made mistakes in Doctor Who books. Sometimes you just have a brain fart where you put a thing and it's only when you see the published page you go, no, that's wrong. Why did I put that? And why did I not check that when I 3, 4, 5, 6 times when I've gone over that? It's because your brain and your mind is on different things. It's funny how the mind works. And you sort of skim a bit that you kind of should know, and then you dive into the bits that you sort of think you probably don't know and make sure you get those right. It's like, what's the name of that theatre? And then you might put the wrong name of the director of something because you know the names of the director. Do you know what I mean? So it's funny how the brain works like that. But deliberate dishonesty is very, very naughty. And here we have another example of the children's writing of the Sensorites. I mean, they're drinking the water, and Ian basically goes, "So do we all drink the water?" I mean, it's a really odd question to ask, that, isn't it? And and they've boom, Mike. So what that Sensorite is either Anthony Rogers or Jerry Martin. I think it's Jerry Martin, who are sort of younger walk-on types. Even though first and second Sensorite, Ken Tilson and Joe Gregg, play all sorts of different Sensorites throughout the rest of the story. And Arthur Newell here, who is fourth Sensorite, was a Conservative councillor in Ealing, I think. My friend Michael McManus, who wrote the Brigadier's, Nicholas Courtney's biography, was a great friend of Nick Courtney, and Michael is a former, well, he's a politico. He works in government and political lobbying and stuff, and quite active member of the Conservative Party. Although last time I spoke to him, he was a bit disillusioned with it all. I'm a different political leaning to Michael, but he's a jolly good friend of mine, and I love him dearly. But he knew Arthur Newell and gave me some nice little snippets about him, and said that Arthur quite liked to, say that I was a Sensorite in Doctor Who, But yes, William Russell is, what I love about William Russell here is that he's trying to remain sort of polite whilst he's been poisoned, because he thinks he's just got a cough, but he's acting it just enough for the kids to spot, who've already had the water talk, to go, oh God, could it be poison? I mean, if you can't imagine that, you're not exactly Columbo, First Elder. I mean that. There's no way that anybody of any age or intelligence watching this could miss the obvious clues as to the poison. They haven't. This is not something that has been placed there for us to work out over the next 3 or 4 episodes, which you would kind of do now. You'd set this up as a mystery to be solved much later to it being brought up. But I mean, they really contrive that conversation between Ian and the First Elder about the water, where the First Elder says, yeah, we absolutely don't drink anything else, but everybody drinks the water you're just about to drink. But that's the hidden danger, and it's hidden in the water supply. So now somebody's going to go and have a race against death. So, I mean, lots and lots of kiddie kind of writing in that, for sure. But you know what? I don't mind, and don't get me started on the fact that they call first, second, third, and fourth, because there's a whole lot of stuff there. But I mean, it's a charmingly naive episode, and as I say, I hate the fact that makes me sound slightly patronising. But I do think I do think they lower their ambitions in terms of, I've always said, I always feel that Doctor Who works because it's written to be suitable for children. It's not written down to children. And I think this is one of the rare examples of Doctor Who being written down to children. So I've got to choose a favourite thing about that episode, which I largely you'll notice I talked over with my theories about Peter Haining putting Jeremy Bentham's words into the late Peter Glaze's reanimated mouth, which I may live to regret for episodes 4 and 5, because actually there's plenty to talk about there on the visit to the Sense Sphere, and perhaps I should have availed myself of the opportunity to do that. Oh, life is full of regrets. But let me just... What was my favourite thing about that? Well... I mean, have I said the design of the Sensorites masks? I don't think I have I? No, I think I had... I had the moving out of the TARDIS in episode 1, and I think I had the Psychic Susan Unearthly Child thing from episode 2. I mean, I do like the dynamic between the quartet. I do like the design and the look of the Sensorites world, which, with all its curves and stuff. Although I think it's odd. I've never really fixated on this before when watching this, but I think it does. I wonder if it's to do with the way that it's shot by Mervyn Pinfield, who I think has a lovely sort of languid pacing about what he does, but it does look cramped. He hasn't particularly cleverly disguised the lack of space, which I think other Doctor Who stories might do a bit better. And I wonder if it's because the other directors this season are sort of dynamic young Turks, whereas he's been around a long time and isn't perhaps as energetic to break the mold and make this stuff look modern, as it were. But then again, I kind of do like that. I love the fact it's in black and white. I think this looks much better in black and white than it would in colour, for example. I do like this. I do like the Sensorites face. And I think, and although it's going to actually turn out to be a disadvantage when it comes to certain aspects of this story, I do really like the Sensorites masks. I think they're odd. I like the fact that they've differentiated them with different hair, and I like the fact that although they've slightly followed the way that our hair grows, they have sort of put it in different places on the faces, and the fact that they're slightly, even in this good quality, they're slightly a bit like when we talked about Ambassadors of Death, having a sort of otherness about it and a strangeness that you can't quite put your finger on. I can never quite put, particularly their faces. I think obviously their portly shapes are somewhat quaint by today's standard, but I think there's something sort of beguiling and strange and charming and effective. I think they're good masks that work and stand up today. So I think, because is there anything else that I could choose from the Sensorites from episode 3? No, because there is. I could choose the fact that it's a stark example of what Doctor Who could have done so often. He's good, he's evil. The fact that, I'm first elder, you're second elder, I'm first Sensorite, second Sensorite, third, all of that. And the fact that a lot of the dialogue is a bit kiddie-widdy is an example of, shows us just how good and ambitious was Doctor Who in that department elsewhere. But that's damning with faint praise, isn't it? In fact, it's not. It's praising with arch damning, which is not what this is about. Now I'm going to go for the Sensorites masks, which means episodes 4 and 5 are going to be interesting. I maybe wanted to keep those in reserve, but let's see what Steve Lyons has to say. He's so far chosen. He chose the same as me in episode 1, which was the coming through the TARDIS doors. And episode 2, he beautifully he gleaned the best out of the sort of the languid pace of Ian and Barbara's encounter with the Sensorites, and found that unsettling and different from the sort of breakneck running through corridors that we often associate with Doctor Who. So we're currently 1-1 because I didn't choose that. The other thing I would perhaps like to have chosen for episode 3 is I did, and again it's a dynamic that didn't really interest me in the past. But the Doctor and the Susan, that grandfather to granddaughter dynamic, I watching it this time round really kind of appealed to me, because it's so different from the Doctor's normal interactions with his companions, and it makes that special and unique. And it works because of the age gap between them and the obvious bond that the actors and the characters have, which is the sort of thing that I wasn't really looking for when I was watching Doctor Who as a younger person. And then as an older person, where I was determined that Doctor Who should all fit together in the way that I wanted it to fit together, I kind of ignore the Susan being the granddaughter thing because I don't really like it. It's not really up my street in terms of what I want from the show, in terms of I don't want I want the characters to interact in terms of bonding in the face of danger and all of that, but I don't want them to be relatives. I don't want family. I don't want soap or whatever we want to. However, we want to damn that sort of stuff when we're shallow people who like sci-fi action adventures and concepts. People with relationships and emotions. I've come to escape all of that. But I found that really worked, and it's a credit to the actors as well. And it's it's giving Susan something to do that isn't screaming or being in jeopardy. So I did like that. Do I choose that actually instead of the Sensorites masks? Because I might need them later. Yeah, and I think because it surprised me this time around, because on previous goes, I'd have sort of seen that beginning of the episode, and it's about the first 5 minutes, as a bit of a prologue to getting to the meat of the story, which is getting to the Sensorites planet and resolving that part of the plot, and just see it as a sort of perfunctory get out of that excellent cliffhanger where it looked like Susan was taking control, but it needed to be done in order to get the rest of them down to the planet, and it took a bit of time, but it did give her moment of agency, and it did. And it had ups and downs, because it had the Doctor sort of remonstrate with her and her have to show her loyalty to him, and then them sort of make up afterwards while Ian and Barbara took care of the Sensorites. So it's got a lovely use of the regulars, actually. So yeah, I think I'm going to say the dynamic between Susan and the Doctor at the beginning of the episode, and so that's 2 Susan-y bits for me, one episode after another. So I'm going to keep my powder dry. With the Sensorites masks, I'm gonna flourish that as my joker when an episode appalls me, which is distinctly possible, or not, because maybe I've just been put in such a good mood by my love for Doctor Who that I can happily sit through the Sensorites and enjoy what it has to offer. But for those of you who like me being critical, I think I was just quite critical of some of the obvious flaws with this episode, but it doesn't make me want to harm it. Maybe just shout at it a little. Occasionally turn the lights off and hear it scream. What is Steve Lyons going to choose as his thing for episode 3? And if he chooses the masks now, I'm going to kick off.
My favourite thing about episode 3, Hidden Danger, is simply the way that Susan is written. Not necessarily her telepathic powers, although that's part of it. I just think she comes across as a better rounded character here and in the rest of this story than she does at any other time.
I think I'm going to have the point for that, Do you know what? I am. I have so little chance of ever winning. I think because I chose that dynamic between Susan and the Doctor and Distributor, but that's what I was alluding to, the way that this story, and indeed because I chose her last week as well. Yeah, no, I think I get the point for that. So I think there's a hidden danger for you, Steve Lyons, that I might... Well, I'm not going to. We've still got a choice for episodes 4, 5 and 6 and the overall bonus thing. So, but I'm going to enjoy my victory while I can. And in fact, I will... Yeah. So, I'm definitely going to give myself a point for that. So it's currently 2-1. Steve chose the way that Susan is written, and I'd outlined why that is effective when giving you my last-minute switcheroo of a choice, which often backfires on me. But that's great, so I'm very pleased about that. Wouldn't it have been funny if he'd said, my favourite thing about episode 3 is the fact that the Doctor Who celebration describes Peter Glaze as scheming and not really a villain. So don't write in after this and tell me about Crackerjack, because by the time you listen to this, I will have found out the timeline of Peter Glaze's career on Crackerjack. I'm pretty sure he was doing Crackerjack when this was on, but I could be wrong. I'm no expert on Crackerjack. I'm no expert on anything, actually. I'm not an expert on anything. I am just somebody who's very keen, who remembers, who is lucky enough to remember certain things. But I'm not studied. I'm not an expert. I'm just I'm just full of ideas. So listen, and desperate to right wrongs. That's why it's terrible, isn't it? I've got a festering sense of injustice, and the fact that Peter Haining gave us a false interview with Peter Glaze. Maybe that's why I did the Who's Round thing, was to get these people on record so that we'd got proper record. But how many people did we not interview? Nobody. I don't think anybody interviewed Arthur Newell, even though I know people who knew him and met him. Why didn't they interview him? Michael, what were you doing? Instead of voting Tory, you should have been getting fourth Sensorites testimony on record. Peter Glaze, I think he died in 83, 84, something like that, didn't he, Peter Glaze? Ken Tilson, I know, wrote to a couple of people and knew somebody I know, but I never actually got to speak to him. I did write to him, and then never sent it. I think he was on my list during anniversary year, but it was a busy year. But then, of course, we got loads of people on the commentaries, and who we didn't get on the commentary, Ilona Rogers, I Skyped, so I've got her. Lorne Cossette, nobody ever got. He was back in Canada. Stephen Dartnell I spoke to, but never interviewed. That's a shame, isn't it? We did used to leave questionnaires at stage doors for actors, but I don't know if we left one for... I don't know if we did leave one for Dartnell. I think it may not have occurred to us to do that till later. He seemed quite sort of baffled by the whole thing anyway, but he was very genial enough. But wouldn't he have been great to have got on record? I was there. I was in his presence. In the great scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And I'm sure in Stephen Dartnell's great scheme of things, him not going on record for what he remembered about being in the Keys of Marinus and the Sensorites is probably remarkably trivial. And of course, a lot of people, when you do finally track them down, don't remember anything anyway. And people weren't remembering stuff when you met them in the 80s. So a lot of the people we spoke to 30 years after that. But anyway, it would have been nice. It would have been nice. I would feel like it would have been work well done. Eric Francis, the first Elder, was still acting. When I was cognizant, he was in Chancer with Clive Owen. He was still on the telly. He was still going. I think I assumed everybody was old in the Sensorites because they are sort of old characters. In fact, 2 of them are called Elder. So I think I assumed that Eric Francis was like 1 million years old. But he's probably my age in this, isn't he? That's terrifying. Anyway, look, I have a current sense of victory, which I know will be short-lived. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go and celebrate with a good old drink. And I don't drink alcohol anymore, so I think I'll just have a big glass of water. Yes, our water comes from a tap, and we in this house, we drink the water in this house, but nobody in the rest of our street drinks the water in our house. So if everybody in the rest of our street dies and we don't die, you'll have no idea what the cause of their deaths are. I've no idea, even though I've just told you that only we drink our water and that they drink their water. I'm sure the conundrum. Everyone in my streets just died. What? How could that be happening? I've no idea. Anyway, I'm off to glug it down. My lovely, clear, unpoisoned water of the Chorlton water. Never mind the crystal water. The Chorlton water, pure as the driven snow. Okay, so I will come and join me for a race against death next time. I'll drink to that. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and my special guest, Steve Lyons. Please buy his books and audios and invest in his talent, because he's got bucket loads of it. I'm grateful to Steve and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Adam Westwood, Stephen White, Tom White, Michael Williams, Rhys Williams, Andrew Willis, Andrew Wilson, David James Wilson, Sydney Wilson, Joel Ahrens, Joanne Abbott, Keith Adams, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Neil Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Araiza, Radit Aritza, Endaf Arwin, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, John Babb, P. Baker, Richard Baker, John Ball, Stephen Bamford, Simon Barker, and Ollie Barrett. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, then that is one of the bonuses of being a patron of these podcasts. You can become one of those by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases, bonus releases, exclusive content and pictures of my dog. That's all available at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, and you get a 10% discount for signing up for a year in one go. All of the audio and visual content is available at the lowest tier, but you can ascend the rung dependent on inclination, really. There's not much to lure you up there. It's a kind of, it's a fairly egalitarian sort of system, I think. Hope so, anyway. If you want to support these without having to do a monthly thing, but still occasionally like banging a few shekels in the way of self-employed artists whose work you consume or enjoy, there's another way of doing that, and that's at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. The way of doing it without any financial commitment whatsoever, which is perfectly understandable. I listen to loads of podcasts that I don't pay for. It's the way that these things work these days. I would be grateful, though, if you could just pay me back with a little bit of your time by going to the Spotify, Podbean, iTunes, Apple, all those places where you can rate and review podcasts and give these a few lines of positive commentary saying what you like about them, and those all-important 5-star ratings, which help to polish my algorithms, which means that more people listen to this stuff, and the more people that listen to them, the more I can justify to my loved ones why I spend most of my life in a cupboard rather than being with them or washing the dishes or doing that increasing to-do list of things to do around the house and garden. When I'm thinking about all the things I should be doing around the house and garden, I'm usually scrolling through social media, because I'm all over that. I'm on Twitter at Hadoke Podcasts or at Toby Hadoke, depending on whether you want just stuff that's about these podcasts or things concerning the comedy work that I'm doing and all sorts of other bits and bobs, or indeed both. There's nothing to stop you following but both of those Twitter/X feeds. I'm also on Instagram, where I put up photos and videos, mostly of comedy content, but also some of the Doctor Who stuff that I'm up to. Quite often me on a train going, I can't show you anything that will suggest vaguely where I'm going, because I've signed non-disclosure agreements, so I'm on a train going to do a Doctor Who thing you'll never be able to guess. And apparently people then go on and go, well, that seat cover is from a Southern Regions train, which means he's probably heading to John Smith Street, Derbyshire, or whatever. I'm just making up addresses now. I've never been to Derbyshire for a Doctor Who thing. So that means he must be doing, that must mean a season 11 box set is due tomorrow. But I tend to be able to cover my tracks. So anyway, that's rather fun. I'd rather not be putting up photos of just my face, but it's hard when you're not allowed to photograph anything else. But I've been out and about on Blu-rays and things, and you will get photos and videos from behind the scenes of those Blu-ray documentaries on my Patreon feed. That's one of the exclusives that's there. But yeah, and I'll put the odd photo on Instagram. That's at Toby.Hadoke, and I have a Facebook page as well. So, I'm all over the internet, as well as my website, www.tobyhadoke.com. Well, I'm sorry it took me so long to get to episode 3 of the Sensorites. I quite enjoyed that. Gonna have a break now, and I'm it's a little secret as you've listened right to the end. I'm not gonna have a glass of water. I'm gonna have a cup of Earl Grey tea, and then I'm probably going to go and answer some AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, which is an exclusive that patrons get. But I've also got to edit a video to plug my comedy club, which, as I record this, is tomorrow night. And that's Excess Malarkey every Tuesday. And then I've got to do some accounts, probably got to answer some emails, probably got to resist the temptation to shoot myself in the head because of the hoops that you have to jump through to get paid by the BBC these days. But that's all the fun of the fair. I'll tell you what, if they're as frightened of shouting as the Sensorites are, I mean, whoa, anyway, I'd have to kill them. Anyway, so what fun! Yes, as I record this, I've actually had a bit of a decompress after the latest season of Doctor Who finished, because I'd been racing to do a podcast every week, and an indefinable magic based on the events or things inspired by the latest episode, and I still haven't done the last one of those as I record this. I've half written it, but I've got to record that. It's another thing I've got to do as well. Oh, it's all go. So I won't be moving as slowly as they do in Sensoritesville. Otherwise, I'll be a very, very old man by the time I've fulfilled all my obligations. So perhaps I should stop talking now and leave you all to it.